afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Unlocked Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. This is Michael Cross, your host, and I hope that the following program you'll find intellectually stimulating and maybe something that will benefit you. Well, we'll see. Let's take a look at the topic today that I'd like to deal with. And what I'd like to talk about is trees. No, not the thing about, how to grow a tree or how to prune a tree. That's something that you'll have to go to some of those extension shows that often are on Saturday mornings in the U.S. No, the thing I'd like to talk about is the symbolism, first of all, of the tree of life, and then get into the idea of, well, why I think our culture, and maybe the people in various subcultures in today's society, maybe the reason why there's a lot of unhappiness, a lot of disconnect, a lot of feeling of alienation, and people trying to substitute things like alcohol and drugs and consumerism and celebrity worship, that includes sports worship, and other things that really don't really matter in the long run. Okay? They're trying to find something to satisfy that craving, what Carl Jung called an archetypal craving that we have to connect to our past. And I will note that if we don't learn to better connect to our past and where we came from, we're going to really lose sight of who we are, the values that have brought us here, and ultimately maybe it would endanger whether, well, we as a group or we as individuals within a family will continue into the future. Now, I said I'd like to say something about the symbolism, and again, this is going to sound really esoteric, okay? But it's going to have a little bit of psychology and, esoteric thought and stuff thrown in, because, we're kind of dealing with a Jungian theme. Now, the tree of life. I'd encourage people to look it up. It's a very enduring symbol that you'll find all over the world and throughout ancient cultures. You find it in Sumeria, very interesting depictions of the tree of life. You find it in the Nordic religions, the ancient ones, Hebrew or Judean tradition, very strong there. In fact, takes on different meanings if you go into Kabbalistic studies and so forth. You have it in ancient Aztec depictions. And in all of these depictions, I can continue going on and on because, it's all over the world. In all of these depictions, it usually means the same thing. It's an origin or the creation of the human family, the human society, and it branches out from a focal point, just as a tree would do. So this is why it's been a very enduring archetypical symbol. And so you could show this symbol to people in all these ancient cultures, and they would know what you were talking about essentially. However, if you look at it in today's culture, unless I guess you're a member of the Mormon Church, which is a very central theme, the metaphor of the tree of life, and maybe Jewish culture, most people have no idea what it is. They look at it and think, okay, it's a nice drawing of a tree. And that's really a shame because we really have lost a sense of where we're rooted and who we are. And again, this is not meant for one group or another. I don't care. I mean, I got people of all kinds. When I look at my internet tracker and so forth, there's listeners that all over the world. I actually find I have people that listen to the show in China. I have people in Africa and Middle East and all over the place. So it doesn't matter. This is directed at everybody. Okay? Everyone has a reason to be proud of their culture and to want to preserve it. All right? Now, I will say this. We have one scripture, this is the only Bible scripture I'm actually going to quote here. In Job 18:16, there's a quote, "His roots are dried below, and his branches cut off above. Memory of him perishes from the earth, and he has no name abroad." This is a description not only of what happens to the wicked, but it also has the esoteric meaning that people who support this kind of, they go into wickedness, often it means it goes into selfishness. I mean, we can look at the ancient Romans, the ancient Greeks, the elite. Their number one problem was not so much their decadence, but the fact they turned away from the family ideal. And they just started, kind of dying out, just like it says here. Now, this can apply to people that just say, I'm just not going to have kids. I don't believe in having kids. I don't want to be bothered with it. Well, in a sense, you're not going to be remembered in the future, okay? All right, you pick up a history book, it has a few hundred names in it. Most people out there are not going to be in the history books in the future. Okay? So the idea that there's something that's enduring of your legacy if you don't pass on your family genes, so to speak, is, well, it's kind of delusional. Of course, I'm going to get into nihilism in just a moment. But anyway, think about that, though. And there'd be no name abroad, and you'd be perished from the earth. There's a lot of ancient civilizations. You don't even know about them unless you do crack an old history book and look and go, whoa, that's an interesting civilization. It doesn't exist anymore. And in fact, none of the people from that civilization exist anymore. So, there's cases of that. So it's kind of like, okay, it's a trivial thing. Maybe you get some question on a game show. It's kind of sad, really. Anyway, we take a look at the Ten Commandments. I guess I lied. One more scripture. So that's one of the Ten Commandments there. Thou shalt not lie. But anyway, that's a third one. I should go on here. Exodus 20:12. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord God giveth thee. I think honoring your father and your mother, it goes beyond just, hey, Dad, you're a great guy, or hey, Mom, you're a great woman. It goes into the traditions they have passed on to you. Okay? I think that's ultimately what that scripture means. And a people who, just like in Job, the ones that just kind of say, I don't care where I come from, this is me, and I'm going to live life for the present, and, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow I shall die. The thing is that the reason why I think this applies as in a cultural context is, again, we take a look at modern society where people just kind of don't value where they come from anymore. And I've noticed people that really study their family history, stuff like that, they tend to, when they're younger, they tend to be more into the idea of, someday my kids, I'm going to pass this down to them, and I'm going to give them this information and so forth. And people that don't, they just kind of like have no sense whatsoever of their family traditions. They often are like, well, if I have kids, and if I pass it down. And I think ultimately this goes beyond just the whole idea of whether you're going to have kids or not. I think this goes into, mental health and all these other things. Well, anyway, let's go on. Well, one last thing here. This isn't from the Bible. This is from an individual named Marcus Garvey. He was a Jamaican entrepreneur and civil rights leader. It's one of the main inspirations for Rastafarianism and a lot of the African American civil rights leaders. And I think this applies to, like I said, whatever race, whatever ethnicity. And it says, a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Okay? Again, that goes into that whole idea of the tree of life. Let's just saw it down there. You got to know where you come from to know where you're going. Okay? So, anyway. Now, getting into this a little deeper. Psychologist Carl Jung coined the phrase, the collective unconsciousness has to do with archetypes that connect us to our ancestors. You see, he believed our unconscious mind, there was two parts to it. One was the part in which we have memories. You know, it could be good memories, bad memories, good feelings, those kinds of things. That's in our unconscious. It drives us. It actually directs a lot of our life. The psychoanalytic school of thought says that most of what's going on in our life and the way we see life is actually directed by our subconscious. We don't even know where these things come from. Okay? All right? Marketers know all about this stuff. That's why Edward Bernays, he borrowed his uncle's book on psychoanalysis. His uncle was Sigmund Freud, and he found out how he could sell stuff to people without them even knowing it. And he was a father of modern advertising. Well, anyway, Carl Jung took a different approach than his colleague Sigmund Freud's nephew did. And, you know, he wrote a lot of really good stuff. I found this quote that I want to read you from, you can find it at jung.org under the title The Symbolic Life. Okay? It says, you see, man is in need of a symbolic life, badly in need. We only live banal, ordinary, rational, or irrational things. But we have no symbolic life. Where do we live symbolically? Nowhere except where we participate in the ritual of life. Have you got a corner somewhere in your house where you perform the rites as you can see in India? Even the very simple houses there have at least a curtained corner where the members of the household can perform the symbolic life, where they can make their new vows or their meditation. We don't have it. We have no such corner. We have our own room, of course, but there is a telephone that can ring us up at any time. And we always must be ready. We have no time, no place. We have no symbolic life, and we are all badly in need of the symbolic life. Only the symbolic life can express the need of the soul, the daily need of the soul, mind you. And because people have no such thing, they can never step out of this mill, this awful, banal, grinding life in which they are nothing but. Everything is banal. Everything is nothing but. And that is the reason why people are neurotic. They are simply sick of the whole thing, sick of that banal life, and therefore they want sensation. They want a war. They all want a war. They are all glad when there is a war. They say, thank heaven, now something is going to happen, something bigger than ourselves. You know, this has actually gotten only worse since Jung wrote this. Now, he doesn't mean a symbolic life, like you can go in and spend a bunch of time on the computer playing a computer game, or have an avatar on one of these virtual living type sites. He means a symbolic life where you actually get into your brain and connect to higher powers, higher thoughts, higher meanings. Now, the thing he said about having a phone nearby, you got to remember when he did this, it was just that you had a phone, a wire phone that was connected, probably sitting, connected to the wall or sitting on a table. And he felt, well, you're always on call. And now think about what we do. We have people don't even buy alarm clocks anymore because they have their cell phone. They put it next to their bed. I've heard some bad things about doing that, yet I'm kind of guilty of it myself. But the thing is that we're not just on call. We are all connected. I mean, we get on social media. Has someone said something interesting? Most people can't sit and watch a movie on TV or anything without having their cell phone in their lap, kind of watching the movie, watching the cell phone, playing a game. Oh my gosh, what's Justin Bieber or Kim Kardashian doing this week? And there's no downtime really for a lot of people. And then he says this is causing neurosis because everything's just get up, go to work, come home, go on TV, go on this, go watch your social media, that sort of thing. And ultimately people just want some sort of sensation. They want to connect. They want to have something that feels real. So maybe that's why, news programs always show devastation and wars and remote things happening, because this is a reality in a sense. This is where things happen that are unexpected in the world. I remember a science fiction show that played a few years ago. I can't remember the name though. And about this guy who's like a hotel owner, and there's this really weird guests that come in, and he finds one of their passports, and then he's really into history. He and his kid, they study history, lots and lots and lots, and he notices all the dates are for when disasters took place that are stamped on the passport. And he's like, what the heck is this all about? He figures out there's a disaster about to take place. These guys are time travelers. They're from the future where everything is so perfect that they just desire to come and see devastation because they need something real. And the thing is, whereas we're not in a perfect state yet. I mean, we don't have that whole Ray Kurzweil thing where we can download ourselves into a computer and live forever, or some of these other ideas that we can, get a synthetic body and never have illness and always have perfect health and eternal youth. We're not there yet, although I wouldn't doubt if we don't get there. The thing is, essentially, we do need to try to get back maybe a little bit of connection to our past before we do start venturing into this brave new world, so to speak. Especially as we go into areas that, well, at least in recorded history, we've never been before. Who knows what was going on in Noah's day? There's some interesting stuff in various apocrypha that would indicate that maybe they had some interesting technology that we don't even have. But anyway, let's just kind of go on here. Now, the thing is, like I said before, consumerism, alcohol, corporate sports, social media, celebrity, gossip, those things can't satisfy what it is to be human. They actually, in my opinion, only intensify it. It's kind of like you taste something that just whets your appetite, but it's not enough to really satisfy it. Now, many people today have no true connection to concepts larger than them. They're seeking them in artificial places, but maybe this is why, when you do ask a lot of people about family, they just say, well, nah, I'm not going to have kids. What difference does it make anyway? See, this is a symptom of nihilism, and it's nothing new. But in the past, it was usually confined to spoiled rich kids in the 19th century, for instance. Now it's infecting an ever-increasing percentage of the regular population, since we're all so interconnected. Okay, so it's not a situation now where a very, very tiny group of people who happen to like a certain philosophy or something get together and they kind of take existentialism to the extreme, and pretty soon, nothing really matters. And, it leads to a lot of depression and worse. But now we have a situation where it's kind of out there all over the place. Of course, corporate America is willing to give you substitutes, for all of these things, but it doesn't satisfy. Now, one of the things I would say is one of the best things people can do nowadays is try to connect more to the simple and get out of the artificial. Carl Jung was talking about people just being in their houses and, their phones sitting there, can call them anytime, and there's no real meaning. I just thought about the idea that, in Japan, where they had confined living spaces, many of the people still traditionally did and still do have little tiny gardens. This was their way of still connecting to nature. It wasn't so much that they were beautiful, although in many cases they were and are. It was a way to feel that you were still part of the bond with creation. Okay? Because when you compare walls in our house, I don't care how well you decorate it, it's not like nature. Okay? It doesn't give you the same feeling. But at least if you have a little garden or something, it can give you something. But I think, most people live where they can actually go out and experience nature. This is connectiveness. And one of the things I just thought of, you can connect to your ancestors in nature. if you're hiking deep in the woods or strolling along the coast, or if you live in the desert, you're out hiking a desert trail, you're seeing life if it's, unspoiled and hasn't really been, messed with or developed. You're seeing life as people saw it hundreds of years ago. Okay, if you're fortunate enough to live near like an old growth forest or something like that, you can walk through there and realize those trees were already big when George Washington was allegedly cutting down his father's cherry tree. Okay? The thing is that these were trees that maybe ancient American Indians, walked by or sat by or had their campfire by or something. And that is pretty special. Or if you're on the coast. I was traveling in Europe in this one area, and there was a quarry along the coastline, and there was a sign, that it had long since been abandoned. It sort of looked like the quarry scene in the movie Noah, where he comes across an area where there's machinery and stuff, but it's kind of rusty and no one's using it anymore. And I came across a spot like that, and there was a historical plaque, and it was explaining what people used to do 100 years ago when they worked there. And man, I was thinking, this is the area where people lived and worked, and there was a thriving community there. It's not there anymore, but there used to be. That's connection to your past. That's what I think. Taking a kid to go see something like that is way better than taking them to some sort of theme park or something. It's something where you have a feel. Maybe feel the ghost of ancient peoples in these regions. Okay? And speaking of like ghosts and spirituality and stuff like that, I remember I was with a group of people, and we were hiking a trail in Utah's Wasatch Front. And there was a whole bunch of mountains. I think it was Mount Timpanogos was there. And this guy was from Iraq. And he looked around at the mountains, and he asked the question, how could anyone ever be an atheist when surrounded by mountains like that? You see, I think what he was touching on was the fact that there's a sense when you're in nature and in these kinds of settings, there's you can sense the spirituality or magic when you're surrounded by the untouched and unmodified nature. I try to include that in my Freedom from Conscience books, to give the readers a shared experience with the heroine. And, you try to describe how a person would be thinking when they're out in nature and away from it all and so forth. And, it is so, I've just been in a situation where I've been like, you're sitting next to a creek, and, it's so much more marvelous to watch the dynamics there than it is to sit in front of a TV or something. Well, anyway, I gotta go on here. And, it's been found that nature, there's an article in let me see here, I want to cite this correctly. It's about spending time in nature. Yeah, it's titled, it's from June 3rd, 2010. It's from the University of Rochester. And it's called Spending Time in Nature Makes People Feel More Alive, Study Shows. And there's a quote in there. You can go to the site and check it out. It's a really good article. Nature is fuel for the soul, says Richard Ryan, lead author and a professor of psychology at the University of Rochester. Often when we feel depleted, we reach for a cup of coffee. But research suggests a better way to get energized is to connect with nature. Wow. Yeah. And, when you're in nature, you have again, I'm going to say, there is a sense of spirituality and or magic that can flow into you. And you're where, a leaf on a plant is infinitely more complex and marvelous, a work of creation, than the most fancy office building. And essentially our office buildings and stuff, even our houses for that matter, are just extensions of office buildings are like artificial mountains with caves in them. And our homes are often, well, if you live in apartments, sort of the same thing. And our homes, home, a hut, whatever, but still is so artificial compared to just being outside and examine. What was it, Thoreau, who made comments about looking at ant hills for hours, and marveling at them and at the organization. You could learn a lot by looking at just an ant hill. How many kids do that nowadays? Not that many. How many go out and play in the creek anymore? Oh, it's probably going to neighbors call the cops, Oh, well, he could trip and fall and drown in this creek that's like 3 inches deep or something, or he might get bitten by something, or who knows what. We're too scared to live anymore, too scared to let our kids live. But anyway, what I'd like to say is this. Maybe the way that we could have a healthier society and feel better about ourselves, and maybe a better future, certainly one where we have more of a sense of connection, where we do have the root, which would be our ancestry, the present, where we're at now, like the trunk, and the branches going out. Maybe, our kids or our future kids or grandkids. Maybe the one thing we should do is, if you have traditions that make you and your family unique, then keep them. If you grew up in a sterile, secular, plastic environment, then be like Abraham. Be the first to establish a new set of traditions and pass those on to your kids. Become aware of who you are and that you are unique and special. Society wants to pigeonhole you. Remember that. Society wants you to be a perfect consumer demographic, to be able to be coached, to be able to be manipulated, to be able to be sold to. Resist that. Connect to nature, connect to the powers and symbols, and try to live as a unique human being. Resist this Borg-like, if you remember Star Trek, demand that you assimilate. That seems to be, I don't know what it is. I think it's part of our legacy that when we lived in tribes, that you wanted everyone to kind of be on the same page. And now that we've grown into mega societies, we still have that feeling that we want everyone to fit on the same page. That's why, to a large degree, our media is designed to get us to conform to certain ideals. We're propagandized all the time by our media. Face it. Look it up. Look up Pentagon/movies and influence. Look up CIA literature and movies and this kind of thing. And you'll find that there's a lot of influence that goes on behind the scenes. But, the corporations, the what we usually title the powers that be, really do want us to conform. They want us to kind of be, and think about what they want. Think about what the ideal citizen is in their mind. Just give it some thought. Think about what their ideal citizen is. You might, if you give it some thought, you can go out in nature and think about that one, where you can really contemplate. It's not someone that looks up in the sky and watches meteorites or looks and marvels at the universe. That's not what really society's looking for. They're looking for people that'll fill up malls and spend, and then go to work and make more money, and then go back to the mall and spend, and then go to work and make more money, and then go back to the mall and spend. And you know what? If ideas like marriage and family and stuff like that get in the way, forget them. Go back to the mall and spend. Have more money to spend. That seems to be the ideal citizen in today's society. Anyway, one thing I want to say, though, in closing, running out of time here, even if you're not particularly proud of your family, try to do some genealogy. And, I think everyone's bound to discover some really interesting people back there. And keep in mind that you are the latest link in the grand chain of this life. You can change things if you want to change them. If your family is all crazy or something or weird. But try to find, if you do this, I'm sure you'll find someone back there that you really relate to. Okay, it might be your great grandparent or something. You're going, whoa, I had no idea she did this or he did that. And then you'll be like, well, maybe I do come from a really awesome family. If you're adopted, you got your adopted family. Or look at your culture. Find out what your culture. Go check your DNA if you don't know where you're adopted from. And find out what region you're from. Establish some traditions around that. And, just keep that in mind. And I think that'll add meaning to your life and encourage you to pass this heritage on to your kids and allow a greater sense. And I think ultimately this will allow you to have a greater sense of your own importance. I'm not saying everyone should go around like, totally egotistical and narcissistic and stuff like that. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that our culture promotes an empty narcissism. A narcissism that has to be filled on acceptance for what you own, what you wear, what designer this or that you have, and if you're doing all of the things that's expected of your particular social standing. Okay? That's empty narcissism. As opposed to, we've talked about full-fledged narcissists. They're a different breed than that. Our society's narcissistic wannabes. That's what the society promotes because that is what you make money off of. If everyone lived simplistically, our economy would collapse, wouldn't it? But the thing is that if you want a sense of your true importance, sometimes you have to try to see yourself from the perspective of you are an entity that was created as part of a family. You're part of a creation around you, which is pretty big and awesome, when you contemplate that. And then when you look out, you can be out in the woods and think, whoa, this is these big mountains and trees and whatever. Then you look up in the sky and then you see, the marvels of the universe. And, that it goes on forever, okay? And sometimes in your humility, you gain a sense of your true importance when you consider your uniqueness as well. Anyway, these are just a few things, and just trying to maybe tap into a little bit of that Jungian thought there, and really encouraging people to, try to think a little deeper, a little bit more esoteric, and tap into that collective unconsciousness. There is a sense of power I think you will gain. So anyway, what I wanted to